And we begin at 6 with some raising serious questions about whether the state ordered the wrong drug for the execution of Richard Glossip.
Late this afternoon, the governor issued yet another stay of execution for the death row inmate, just minutes before Glossip was set to go inside the execution chamber.
We have team coverage tonight in McAllister. We'll get to that in just a moment. But first,
more about the reason behind the stay and the new questions about the drugs the state planned to use in Richard Glossip's death.
You'll remember Glossip was convicted in the 1997 murder of motel manager Barry Van Treese. Van Treese was bludgeoned to death in a murder for hire scheme. Glossip has been on death row since 1998. This is the fourth stay that he has been granted.
And the Attorney General's office sending this statement out just within the last 30 minutes that says in part, quote, the Department of Corrections advised the Attorney General's office that it did not have the specific drugs identified in the execution protocol. News Channel 4's Allie Meyer begins our team coverage from our mobile newsroom outside the McAllister State Pen. And
Allie's sister Helen Prejean says the state ordered a fruit preservative instead of the right drug.
Precisely, Linda. We are hearing more from some of those witnesses who thought they might have been witnessing the execution of their friend this afternoon. Let me lay out the timeline for you. So the media arrived here on the premises at Oklahoma State Penitentiary about 10:30 this morning. They closed these gates here at 11:30 this morning. And then at about 1 o'clock this afternoon, we got word from the Supreme Court that the U.S. Supreme Court would not be staying the execution of Richard Glossip. So in the media and among the family members of the victim and the offender, we thought we would be seeing an execution at 3 o'clock this afternoon. At about 2 o'clock, the Department of Corrections drew from a lottery system and selected 5 media members to witness the execution at 3 p.m. But at 3 p.m., there was still a delay and the execution was not happening. They had prepared the vehicle for those journalists to go back to H Unit to witness the execution, but no one was getting on board, and the Department of Corrections was not inviting any of the journalists to go back to the area to witness the execution. And then about 4 o'clock this afternoon, we got word from Governor Mary Fallon's office that the governor, who had repeatedly said she would not be issuing a stay of execution in this case, did in fact issue a stay. And the confusion was because of the drug protocol. The 3 drugs that were set to be used in this execution were midazolam, which is the sedative, the controversial sedative that has been talked about in the U.S. Supreme Court in the past year. Also, rocurium bromide, which halts respiration. And then that third drug, potassium chloride, stops the heart. But instead, we're told from the Department of Corrections, the governor's office, and Sister Helen Prejean, they did not have potassium chloride. They had the food preservative potassium acetate instead. Let's hear more now from Sister Helen, who was inside prison walls when they got the news. What do you know about the involvement of potassium acetate in the execution of Richard Glossip?
It's a food preservative. It also happens to be a Richard Glossip preservative because he's not dead, because they messed it up. They got the wrong drugs. And one of the real bad problems is the Supreme Court has been allowing states to experiment. They're not monitoring this at all. They're leaving it up to the states, and Oklahoma messed it up.
We know Director Robert Patton spoke with the victim Barry Van Treese's family following the stay of execution from Governor Fallon. They got the news from him and chose not to address the media following this latest stay. And for more now on Richard Glossip's reaction after hearing that news today that his life would be spared, we want to turn to News Channel 4's Abby Broyles.
And Allie, I spoke with Don Knight, the attorney who has been on Glossip's latest legal team since earlier this year. He was talking with Richard inside his cell on death row, and Mr. Knight out here with the media talking with us. And he said that Richard was, of course, relieved he is still alive. He was waiting on what he thought was a stay from the Supreme Court or a decision from the Supreme Court. But really, the delay was because of this apparent mix-up with the drugs. Here is what Attorney Don Knight had to say about his conversation with Richard right after he heard the news.
He was in his cell. He said he had been pacing for 2.5 hours in his boxer shorts, waiting for something to happen, not knowing what's going to happen. You know, he talked about how difficult the process is. It's like torture is what it is. You know, I mean, he was thinking that they were going to come. He was waiting for the stay.
Now, the execution has been reset for Friday, November 6th. That is 37 days for the state to take a look at the drug protocol. And so we will learn more about what they find with that. Another execution is set for next week, next Wednesday. But we do not know at this point whether that execution will go forward. We are still waiting to hear from the governor's office and the Department of Corrections on that. For Allie Meyer, I'm Abby Broyles reporting live in McAllister. Back to you.
Have a good job, thank you. Glossip has seen an outpouring of support from high-profile anti-death penalty advocates like Susan Sarandon and the sister Helen Prejean.
Today, dozens gathered at the state capitol to protest his execution, but soon those protests for them became tears of joy.
News Channel 4's Leslie Rangel joins us there. She has been there live all afternoon, and the protesters are gone, but the sentiment has not left those grounds.
That's exactly right. Just moments ago, the last few protesters left. And let's show a little bit of video of what the scene was like out here earlier at the governor's mansion. There were many representatives, not only from religious backgrounds, but even people from the ACLU, all saying there is hope that Richard Glossip will not die. And it seems to be that those hopes and prayers were answered for some of these people. Let's take a listen to what one protester had to say.
I'm elated with the 37 days. In 37 days, that miracles can happen. We don't need, the world was made in 7 days.
And of course, you can see how excited that particular woman was. And of course, we do have those 37 days to figure out exactly what will happen. And of course, we will bring you the latest information as it becomes available. Reporting live at the governor's mansion, Leslie Rangel, News Channel 4.
Leslie, thank you. Again, for those of you just joining us, as this has been breaking news all afternoon, Richard Glossip's execution has been delayed once again. The governor issuing a 37-day stay to address questions about our state's lethal injection protocols. His new execution date will be set for Friday, November 6th. There is another inmate scheduled to die in the execution chamber next week. So far, the governor's office says that execution will go on as planned. This is obviously a developing situation. We'll have complete coverage on our website at KFOR.com.